Good evening and good morning for the panelists. Welcome back everyone to our conference. It is sad to say that this is already the last panel of the day and of the conference. We had a very successful 3 days and it was a new experience for all of us in this hybrid setup, but we think it went really well. And yeah, it's sad that it's already over. But not before we have this last interesting panel. Also after this panel, we will do a quick recap on summarizing the content of the conference. But now this panel, the title for the panel is The Road to Reconciliation, Diverse Voices Against Hate Within Myanmar and the Burmese Diaspora, which is organized from the American Jewish World Service, and we welcome all the speakers. And for the moderation of this panel, I would like to hand over the moderation to Khin Mai Aung from the Coalition for Civil Rights in Myanmar. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Hello, can you guys hear me and see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening and good morning to those of you who may be in North America with me. It's been my pleasure to work with Asia Center for the past year or so on various projects, and it's wonderful to be here with this diverse panel. So just to set the stage, I will speak for a couple of minutes about the panel and what we're talking about. I will turn it over to our esteemed panelists, and then afterwards I'll ask a series of questions to the panelists so that we can have an open discussion. So I'm here, in addition to being an associate with Asia Center here in the United States, I am a coordinator of Doa-A-Aye, the Coalition for Civil Rights in Burma, and a coordinator for the Free Rohingya Coalition. And through both of those networks, I have been a volunteer activist for the past few years, working both for accountability and retribution for Rohingya refugees who have fled since 2017, as well as working to advance civil rights in Myanmar as a whole for everybody. It's a precarious time right now in the transition to democracy for Myanmar. We're a few years into a power sharing with the military, which long held control, and with the new civilian government under Aung San Suu Kyi. We are 3 years past the brutal purges against the Rohingya in 2017, and we're approaching a very important election this year. We've been seeing some alarming signs for the past few years, including the jailing of journalists and activists, suppression of free speech, and alarmingly, the use of free speech regulations to actually control and silence religious and ethnic minorities instead of to protect their right to free discourse. And this is something that the Asia Center's Regional Director James Gomez and I have written about this summer in the Irrawaddy newspaper in Myanmar. We've also seen stepping up of repression against minorities seeking regional autonomy using COVID and the pandemic as an excuse. And the pandemic has more broadly been leveraged to shut down the internet and control social movement in ethnic minority areas, particularly areas where there have been movements toward regional autonomy. But there's reasons for hope as well that I see as an volunteer activist working in this space. And over the past few years, I've seen progressives from Myanmar itself, like some of our colleagues here today, as well as in the diaspora, coming together both online and in person to the extent possible before the pandemic to form networks and connections to promote and advance a more inclusive national identity for Myanmar. And I've had the pleasure through Doa-A-Aye of supporting activists in downtown Yangon who supported the International Court of Justice prosecution of Myanmar last year. And I've also worked with those same activists as well as a broad online coalition to support the freeing of jailed journalists and activists in 2019. And the folks in today's panel has played an important role in this work, and I'm looking forward to hearing them talk about various aspects of this work. So without further ado, our first panel goes Thet Swe Win, who's the Executive Director of Synergy, the Center for Youth and Social Harmony, and he's based out of Yangon. I understand he has a special guest with him who will participate as well, his colleague Khin Mai Aung. And Synergy is a civil society organization which is striving to make Myanmar free of identity-based discrimination and to make it more inclusive. So I will turn it over to them to talk about the general context of civil liberties in Myanmar and the challenges that it faces right now. Got that?
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be invited to share my concern and like share my experience and like the situation of Burma right now, what is happening in the country. As we all know that the elections are drawing closer, and at the same time, the COVID-19 is like, spiking up again, that, we have a lot of, death rate and a lot of positive cases day by day. So people are like, especially in Yangon, the city like in Yangon, we are in the very unfighting situations. At the same time, the war in Rakhine State is very much heavily, fighting, and then the civilians are being killed, during the fight. So even like, a few days ago, like 3 Rohingya men were killed by the Burmese army, while they were just, going to their field, to their paddy field in the morning, and like, they were struck by the Burmese army, and then they got shot. So many cases, like not only to the Rohingya, but especially like, the Rakhine war is that, after the 2017, but the war in Rakhine is like not only between the Burmese or Rakhine or Rohingya, but because like many of the Rohingya people were fled, right? So, and also the Arakan army, the AA, so they are getting stronger. So that they got a lot of support, the enormous support from the local Rakhine people. So the Rakhine nationalism are getting stronger along with the Arakan army, and also the Arakan army's leadership, especially with the General Tundanai. So like he delivered the speeches, to all of the people in Rakhine State, not only towards the Rakhine ethnic, but also to every ethnic in the Rakhine State, that, to be staying peacefully together and not to discriminate each other. And then he also kind of, recognized the identity of the Rohingya people. So this kind of, speeches that he delivered to the Rakhine people, and then the Rakhine people support a lot of, they support a lot to the Arakan army, and then at the same time that the Burmese military target is being shifted to the Rakhine people and Arakan army. So like until 2017, so Rohingya people were targeted, and then ASA were also being blamed for everything. But right now that the Burmese military is fighting against with the Arakan army, and then like many of the Rakhine people got killed, so from the January 2020 this year until right now, so about 300 Rakhine people got killed during the war, and then about 30 people died in custody, and 640 people injured. So among them, many of them were like the older people, and also the children as well. Like last month, we did a campaign because we saw the photo of only 5-year-old girl got killed by the bomb shell by the Burmese military. Since then, many of the young people from the Rakhine State and also from the mainland and also across the country, they started the campaign to stop the war in Rakhine State. Among them, the Rakhine Student Unions and also the Burmese Student Union called the Pakata, the ABSFU. So they are very actively fight against, they did a lot of campaign against the Burmese military and then to stop the war. So the government arrested them for doing the protest against the war by the Emergency Act for the COVID-19, because it was last year. Well, no, sorry, it was last month. They already started the election campaigns. Because of it was a COVID-19 era, right? So the government made an order not to gather more than 5 people, because of the COVID-19. And for the election campaigns, the government ordered that the Union Election Commission ordered that, not to gather more than 50 people for the election campaigns. But since last month, the NLD, so they gather hundreds of thousands of, groups, to show the support of the NLD. But the government just, closed their eyes. They did not take any action. And then when the media asked them, why don't they take any action to those, people? They said, they are our, supporter. We cannot ask them to don't do that. And then why the students protest in front of the government building in Rakhine State? Only 3 students, they did the protest. And they were arrested and they are being charged by the COVID-19 Emergency Act. And also many other different acts as well. So far, about 44 students, Rakhine and Burmese students, were arrested, and then they are being charged by 3 different cases with 505A, 505B, and Article 19. So the 505A and 505B, they can be charged for 2 to 5 years. Even today, 2 students got charged for 5-year imprisonment, for their anti-war campaigns. So we can see that the government and also the military, they are, directly targeting to those students, to not to talk about the issues of the Rakhine State. So that is the one thing. But among those tragedies, that they are also some, good, things, the development among the Rohingya people and the Rakhine people. We are seeing that, the about 20 or more than 20 Rohingya organizations issued a statement, the solidarity statement with the Rakhine people. And also the Rohingya student unions in the Kutupalong camp, they also did a protest to the solidarity protest with the Rakhine students, and also they raised some funds for the Rakhine IDPs in the Rakhine State. So these are the the people from the outside of of Myanmar, outside of the country, are doing this. And also there are some internet discussions in between Rakhine youth activists and the Rohingya activists. So I am one of the mediator of this dialogue. So me and one of our friends in Yangon, we are initiated it. And then we have, since last year, we are connected with the Rakhine progressive youth leaders. And then we are slowly talking with them. And then those Rakhine young people, they already knew that, they did wrong. They did all the, how can I say, bad things to the Rohingya people. So they are regretting now. And also, they now understand that, the Rohingya and Rakhine are in the same side, that, the Burmese military is oppressing them. So they are very progressive. And then, they even use the word Rohingya, when they give speech, or, when they writing on Facebook, and they got a lot of backlash from their own peer Rakhine people, but they keep talking about it. And also the dialogues that we are initiating is very progressive. And then we are doing it every kind of every month, to do it, to build a solidarity. So this is a good, how can I say, development in between among them. And also the COVID-19 second wave, because of it, the government also instigated the hate speech for the Rakhine people, because they made a story. Actually, the COVID second wave it stated from the Rakhine State. They stated, appear again in the Rakhine State. And then, the government said that, it came from the kind of Rohingya people. And then they said, like, we have to, seal up the, the door from the Rakhine, or the door between the Bangladesh. And then they said that, the Rakhine, and also like there were many fake news came out that, the Rakhine people set in the plan that, to fly over to Yangon and then to spread the COVID-19 disease, because the COVID-19 already spreading in Rakhine State. But this kind of, a lot of, hate speech and, false information spread left way. And people, and also the government, they said like, they put the name of like 2,000 passengers who took the flight from the Rakhine State to Yangon. And then they put the name of them, of those passengers. And then they said like, if you don't go for quarantine, then you all will be arrested. So this kind of thing that, they threatened a lot to the Rakhine people. But, no one knows that, how those, COVID-19 second wave, happened in our society. But, they all put the blame on the Rohingya people, on the Rakhine people at the time. So there were a lot of hate speech towards the Rakhine. And also for the election campaigns, a lot of hate speeches are using. So the way that they are campaigning is like to against Muslim. So like even today, the biggest like opposition party, the former ruling party USDP, the chair of the USDP person, USDP, this guy, he made a statement that he doesn't have any mixed blood in his family. In fact, his family is pure Burmese, family. So this kind of that, he is, they are, by saying that, they are discriminating that Aung San Suu Kyi is, marrying a foreigner guy, and then her sons are mixed blood, and this kind of thing. Like they are attacking to Aung San Suu Kyi like that. They say go cliche way that, attacking. And also, not only to the Aung San Suu Kyi, but also they are discriminating to the other, race or religions as well. So this is by the USDP. And also another political party called the People Pioneer Party. So the chairperson of the party is NLD Splinter. She was a former NLD party member, and she was a former MP of NLD party. Then she separated and she found her own political party. And one of the international media mentioned her as Aung San Suu Kyi's competitor. And then they asked her, in an interview about the Rohingya people, that she denied the existence of Rohingya. And also she made another statement about like, about the Muslim people in the country. She standardized 3 different Muslims that, in the country, push a very, wrong message into the people. So all of the Muslim people here are they got very much angry, and then they made a statement yesterday about, her hate speech towards the Muslims. And also like there is one candidate, an individual candidate in the downtown of Yangon. He posted his, like election poster saying that no Rohingya. And then we reported to the UEC, and also, we reported to the international community as well. And then the UEC said that that is not, not a such thing to take it down. And then they said that is not hate speech. So the poster is still there with the signage of, there is no Rohingya. So the hate speech currently that they are using is like, not only to the one particular ethnic or particular religion, but, also towards the broader groups as well. That, it's everywhere, especially online, that, well, someone has something different, opinion, like maybe, and we also, the activists are also being targeted, for our, freedom of speech, whatever we want to criticize, whatever we want to say, we are being targeted, and we got a lot of hate comments through our, Facebook page, and also in our interviews. So it's everywhere that, they are, doing it. Am I still getting some minutes? And then is my time up? Okay. one conclusion that the most targeted during the election era, the election period, the most targeting is that the most targeted group is that the women candidates, because they are women and then they are being targeted by the most massive, attack, by the majority, the groups or by the opposition groups. So the women candidates are also very much vulnerable here. So this is pretty much what I want to cover. And also one last thing is that if the government cannot control the COVID-19 until the next 9, which is the election day, and then there will also be a lot of voter turnout that people are expressing their worry that if the government cannot guarantee their safety for the voting, that there will not be the voters as much as expected. So I'm presuming that there will be a lot of voter turning out. Yeah, this is pretty much.
Thank you, Thet.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Min Thant, who's the manager of Tech for Peace of Pandia in Yangon. And she's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who's covered Myanmar and is now leading a team that's promoting social cohesion in Myanmar through digital and media literacy. So she's going to talk about hate speech specifically and moderating it in an online forum through digital education. So, Min Thant.
Thank you. As I was writing the outline for what I wanted to say today, the focus shifted a little bit. So it's still relevant to hate speech and online forums, but it's a little bit different. Part of why what I wanted to talk about has changed is because a report has come out actually from Frontier Myanmar, which is a local news outlet. They do really good work. And essentially, they have found a network of disinformation and hate speech called Radio Free Myanmar, obviously kind of trying to play off the name of Radio Free Asia. And basically, they've been using this network to spread disinformation about both the NLD as well as Rohingya Muslims. It's based on the posts that they were putting out. It looks like it's meant to sway the election, really associating pro-Muslim rhetoric and policies, by which they really just mean like treating Muslims like they're human beings, with the NLD party, and saying this will cause the downfall of the nation, and trying to galvanize racists to essentially either not vote for the NLD or create increased tensions and suppress votes from especially minorities and Muslims, but minorities in general. And I want to take this as a case study of kind of where and how social media companies fail, as well as organizations like ours, where we're not doing enough work. So I think everyone is fairly familiar with Facebook in Myanmar now. They have been asked to hand over a lot of data to the ICC in the case of Myanmar and genocide and against the Rohingya. There's been a lot of attention put on Facebook about their moderation practices, their hate speech policy, transparency, and accountability. And all of those are really important. And I think this case of this network is a really great example of how Facebook's policies and how they construct their algorithm, as well as how much resources they decide to devote to moderating their platform, can really allow these sorts of networks to proliferate and to do their work undetected. And that by the time either journalists or Facebook itself detects it, a lot of the harm is already done. A lot of the reinforcing of hate speech, a lot of the reinforcing of, sorry, I was reading the notes. A lot of the reinforcing of the disinformation has already reached the audience it was meant to. And it's very easy in most cases for these networks to disband and regroup in other ways. But at the same time, I also wanted to draw a juxtaposition with the Union Election Commission's voter registration, not voter registration, the Union Election Commission's voting app. There's been a lot of controversy about it lately. It was funded by a number of, well-respected and well-known international NGOs, and basically the controversy is that it has candidate lists, but on those lists, it lists the candidates' race and religion. And for Rohingya candidates, it's called them Bengali. And there's also questions of, how is this race and religion information relevant to voters in a country where we've had sectarian violence and rampant, both legal and cultural discrimination against ethnic and religious minorities, right? Like, how is providing this information actually useful and helpful in an election context, especially since it also provides the information for the candidate's father's race and religion, which, if we're students of history, we know that that is never a good sign. The Nazis did this. It's often almost exclusively used in a fascistic context, generally, and as a way to decide these people aren't citizens and these people therefore do not deserve rights or protections from the state. Yeah, and I think looking at these two cases, what we can see is that the failures, or what is failing here, is that we're failing to address the root cause of the problem, which is that racism is sort of just at the root of how both the Myanmar government, but also how many Myanmar people understand themselves and their society, and how they decide who belongs to the country, who deserves rights, who deserves protections. And, we can yell at Facebook all day, and we do. My organization does that quite often. But at the end of the day, they are a for-profit organization who are going to do things that make them money. We can say that their algorithms promote divisiveness, and they do. Their hate speech policies aren't as good as they need to be, and they're not. But they didn't cause the racism. It maybe amplified some voices. It maybe created specific situations in which offline violence happened and facilitates online harassment, I think, especially the women's candidates thing. I think Facebook is definitely, the internet is to blame for a lot of women being silenced online. But for the most part, right, like the racism pre-exists the internet, pre-exists these networks, and that is what we need to address, both through better social media policies as well as legal frameworks, but also by really addressing that within our societies ourselves. And even though my company, my organization is a tech-focused NGO, something that my team really tries to emphasize is that we can't hack our way out of racism. It is just a thing that is going to require a lot of thankless, frustrating, just energy sinking work. And technology is not the cause of it, and technology can't be the solution for it. And even when we are doing our best, and in the case of this UEC app, it was meant to help people vote, help people be more involved, and ideally enfranchise a lot more people, especially women, especially people who are in places where they're not getting as much information through other more traditional means. And especially now that people can't campaign, these sorts of things are meant to do good things, but at the same time, if what they're based on, if the foundation is sort of rooted in with a strain of racism in it, we're not going to be able to solve it through just better tech. It's this racism that we're seeing, the hate speech, the disinformation, is simply going to change its form, and we're always going to be playing catch up to it. And I think while technology has a really important role to play in helping us fight the racism, I think also we need to really step back and look at what role technology is actually playing and how we're building technology in racist ways to begin with.
Thank you so much. So we'll have our last panelist now, Brother Raiss Tin Maung, who is the founder of the Rohingya Human Rights Coalition of Canada, and also the Canada country coordinator for the Free Rohingya Coalition, which I am also a part of and had the pleasure of working with him. And he's going to be talking about inter-ethnic and inter-religious work that he has supported in the Rohingya refugee camps among youth, as well as some of the inter-ethnic and inter-religious coalition building that he's done with Rohingya and other ethnic minorities in Canada, where he's based out of. So, Brother Raiss.
Thank you, Sister Khin Mai Aung. And I'm very, very privileged over here to be speaking alongside Sister Aita and Sister and Brother Kote. It's really a pleasure. It's really a privilege. I'm sorry. I must express this gratitude because it's, where the type of work that you guys are doing, Brother Kote and Sister Aita, you guys are on the grounds, you guys are dodging bullets, and you're doing the real work. My hat's off to you all. My work over here is very, it's very North American for the lack of better word, and of course my work at the refugee camps that is somewhere comparable or somewhere at a playing field, for works on the grounds. So to start with, my work over here in North America as the founder of Rohingya Human Rights Network. We as a team make sure that we connect with our other ethnic counterparts, notably the current brothers and sisters with current community of Canada, with whom we've worked very hand in hand for a lot of our campaigns and a lot of our works in lobbying the government. We have been very successful in attaining some key objectives and making Canada come to the forefront. I mean, we've got a lot more way to go, but for Canada to come to the forefront of raising the flags of what's happening in Myanmar. So my thanks to, it's not not a one-sided work, but also from the current community of Canada. We also have had a chance to reach with some Kachin community members, as well as Shan community members, and Shin as well. So little efforts with inter-ethnic work, and I believe this lays the foundation to have a more coordinated and a more united front towards hate speech and towards hate crime and hate propagation that's happening not only perhaps in Myanmar, but also in the diaspora. So I believe this kind of work is essential to lay sort of the groundwork that is very much required for beginning, to initiate unity in the diaspora, and then hopefully with the good work that Brother Kote and Sister Aita and others who are on the grounds are doing to create that, unity and cohesion. Apart from that, outside of my work and prior to getting involved in activism, I've reached out and I've always been, I try my best to be a practitioner of traditional Buddhist meditation. I've been part of Vipassana, which interestingly originates from Myanmar. I don't know if you are familiar with the school of Vipassana meditation, which was credited to Siaje Obakai, who is from Myanmar, and of course there is Goenka, who was trained extensively in Myanmar before founding this Vipassana network. So I have been an active member of Vipassana, or going to Vipassana chapters prior to even getting involved in my activism work. And I take a lot of interest in this aspect of spirituality that we share in my parents' homeland. I also had a chance to to frequent some Thai monasteries in Ottawa, and connect with fellow members from Ottawa Buddhist Society. Um, so I believe, although it is not very directly related to to Burmese and political Burmese work, but I believe it extends very much from the perspective and from the angle of faith towards my Burmese counterparts, my Burmese Buddhist counterparts, that is. Um, I think this is very important moving forward, not only for my, for myself, but also for my fellow Rohingya brothers and sisters. It might be a very hard sell to tell, to tell my brothers and sisters at the camps that, look, we have to extend ourselves and reach out to understand Burmese Buddhist philosophies and Buddhist teachings. But I believe there are people out there who are interested, and one day with initiatives from people like myself, it is going to extend to the larger Muslim, Burmese, and Rohingya population. Having said that, my work at the refugee camps, it extends to a network of schools that we have at the refugee camps, as well as in the villages. But let me talk about the refugee camps. In our schools, we mandate Burmese language as one of the courses or one of the subjects that the students have to learn, which is a big deal. To be honest with you, for some of you, it might be like, okay, if you are from Burma, you better be learning Burmese. But the fact of the matter is, we have been denied education for the longest time, and those who are living in the camps, they had no access to education for generations. There are people who are born and brought up in the refugee camps, and who do not have any education whatsoever. For the longest time, they would get some Bangladeshi education, but through networks of schools like ours that are very grassroots run, that are run by the refugees themselves, survivor teachers, as a matter of fact. We teach the Burmese curriculum. We bring books from the other side of the river, and that's what we teach our students. So that way, it opens doors for our children to be able to understand and grow themselves in the Burmese culture and Burmese literature, which they would not otherwise, because they are living in a refugee camp on the other side of the border. And hopefully through this education, through this type of education, hopefully someday they will be able to open doors into the further, Burmese philosophical studies, which will facilitate, cohesion and facilitate understanding of the wider Burmese inter-ethnic as well as Burma culture and religion. So these are my two areas of work, one here in Canada and another in the refugee camps. And apart from that, I look forward to opportunities after having connected with Brother Cote and Brother Kone and a few other brothers and sisters through Free Rohingya Coalition, as a matter of fact, through Dr. Zarni. I look forward to supporting some of their work through perhaps some donor connections that I looked forward to exploiting or directing towards the work of. There's a very a sister that I met back at in a trip to Auschwitz, which Dr. Zerny had organized, and Cote was there. There was a sister by the name of Kali Singh. I don't know if you are familiar with her, producing films of inter-ethnic cohesion. Incredible work by this sister. I'm still looking forward towards ways of having some kind of support from organizations here in Canada to support such valuable work. So hats off to you guys on the grounds who are doing the real job, and it would be my pleasure to do whatever I can to bring out support and extend my support from Canadians to you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, what I kind of take from all of your diverse presentations is a few themes mirroring kind of my initial kind of stage setting in the beginning, that, you know, on one hand, we have this threat. We have COVID, we have this very important election with a lot of problematic techniques occurring from the right. We have an increased clampdown of movements toward regional autonomy by minorities, most notably right now the Rakhine. And there's a growing gap between kind of mainstream Burmese thought and the authorities and their framing of the Burmese national identity, as well as who deserves rights and protection, who deserves a voice. And progressives, many of whom are younger, though that, you know, not exclusively, but many of whom are younger students, progressives who of different ethnic backgrounds, the Ma majority, as well as different ethnic and religious minorities, who are seeing solidarity with Rohingya as well as with other ethnic minorities and their struggles, which have also been going on for decades. And, you know, one thing that struck me was my Min Thant, when she said that, you know, on one hand, you can focus on Facebook and technology and how that's a solution. And certainly it's a role, but really the underlying issue is the underlying racism and narrow national identity that dominates most of the country's self perception. And if you don't deal with that, you can deal with technology all you want, but that's the underlying issue. And I think that really strikes me as Myanmar is kind of, like many other countries, including my own adopted country here in the United States, kind of lurching toward a kind of more populist, right-wing nationalism. I think as is happening, you know, a lot of this bridge building that Brother Raiss mentioned between different ethnic minorities in the diaspora, as well as happening, you know, to some extent in the country, and the need for, at least for the Rohingya who've been expelled, to be able to be a meaningful part of the country if and when they're able to go back safely. So with all that, I'd like to ask the panelists, you know, what do you think is really necessary for this increasing progressive awareness of solidarity that's happening amongst activists, both in the country and out, to be able to spread more broadly in the country and the diaspora? Because we face a lot of the same you know, narrow national identity issues, you know, in Burmese abroad as well. So what is necessary to make that gap and to get over the overly narrow national identity?
Who will go first?
You can go, Thet. You seem to have you seem to have turned on the camera and taken the mic. So I'm going to call on you.
No, I'm just like curious who's going to answer. Okay. Yeah, that is very important, you know, not only in between the diaspora and Burmese people, but also even among the Burmese people. I mean, Burmese mean not only Burma and also the other different ethnicities. We don't know each other. You know, the understanding is very important. We don't know each other. And like, we were raised by the Burmese propaganda, which is made by the regime that, you know, for me, like, you know, the socialist regime, and like, you know, the after the 1988, you know, those like, you know, SPTC regime. So all of the curriculum in our school, they were only taught us the greatness of the Burmese people and Burmese king, and also about the Buddhism. But that's all. You cannot find any like, about the Shan legacy or like a Chin legacy or, Karen legacy. You cannot find anything. You cannot find, about all those, other ethnic people in the unions. Like there is nothing. You can only read that, how great the Burmese king are and how they conquer to the, other, ethnicities and this kind of thing. And then actually like the Burmese, the current, the Burma, the Union of Burma is made up of the different, like, independent, what is it, regions. For example, like, Karen, they have their own, sub-region. Karenni, they have never been to any colonial, they have never been colonized by any of the, countries, either Burmese or in English. They were such a, unique liberated area until 1948. But when they only started formed the union in 1948, then only those people can join. And also the Shan people, they have their own, Shan kings. Kachin also the same, So when they all came together to form the union, because of the Penlon Agreement, then Burmese manipulated it. The Burmese, because the majority of that union is Burmese people, right? The Pama ethnic people. So they manipulated it, and then they put the pressure of the Greater Burmese ideology. And also after that, around 1970s, that they put the what is it, the Buddhism as a state religion. By that way, they are put in the Burma, and the Buddhism is the highest, rank in the country. So they are slowly taken out, the other ethnicities. So Rohingya were started, taken out from the, everywhere since around 1970s, since the King Dragon operation. So that, they were kicked out, along with the Mujahideen movement. So they give the excuse of it, and then, many of the Rohingya, and also not only Rohingya at the time, but the Chinese people, also the Burmese Chinese, they were also kicked out, and also the Indian Burmese, like the Tamil people. So many of them were kicked out around 1970s. So this is how they, build the structure of the nation right now. So that is also one of the underlying problem of the country. So that is very important, that we have to try to understand each and every of the people of the country. I mean, each and every group of the people. So, I mean, not only in the country, but also the diaspora groups. We don't know that. For me, it's very new for me that, to hear about the diaspora. Only after after the 2017 attack, like when I go out and meet with many groups, and like, the diaspora groups like, Khin Mai Aung, and, the Khin Mai Aung and other groups, like I just started, meeting with them, and started understand about the diaspora movement. So like we have very limited knowledge about, diaspora activism and the diaspora people, and then, what they are doing. So that is very important for us to be connected, because we know as Khin Mai Aung said, we know the ground situation, and then we have the experience of it, and then we have network here, but we have, because of our knowledge, I mean, the English skill, and also the network capacity, that we cannot reach out to the international. It's quite challenging for the many of the activists in the country, to reach out to the international level. So, but the diaspora people, you guys have that capacity that you can easily access to everywhere, to every level of the the government, globally, whatever. So like these are the strengths that you guys have. So we can connect each other, and we have to try to understand each other, and then we have to find the way that we can work together. So there is a big gap, and also there is a big what is it, chance for us to work to grow together.
Thank you, Thet. I think what I'm hearing in all of this is that, within the country, the different ethnic groups and different religious groups don't really have a chance to interact with each other or learn about each other, and that instead, there's more this bilateral relationship between the Burmese Buddhists and each ethnic minority and their own struggles. and that we need, just like Brother Raiss is learning more about Buddhism and ensuring that in the camps that there's a Burmese curriculum so that the Rohingya can return safely. The Burmese ethnic groups need to learn more about each other as well. And, you know, I think certainly I agree that there's a lot of us that the things that we can do in the diaspora that folks can't in the country. So with that, let me pause and let Min Thant and Raiss contribute. Normally, if we were in the room, I would just kind of make eye contact with you and facilitate who goes when. But since we can't do that, I'm going to start calling on you guys. So Min Thant, you want to speak?
Sure. I think I'll leave my camera on as well, just so it feels a little bit more natural. But yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you were saying. I think one really positive thing we've been seeing in this election, at least, there's not that much good news, but one good news is the Shan NLD's party manifesto, I suppose we can call it. So most of the parties come out with a manifesto. It's usually a few pages max. It's bullet points. It's as vague as they can possibly make it, essentially, so that it's almost meaningless. It's things like, we support the promotion of attempting to be peaceful, right? Like, it's very sort of circular and difficult to understand. And you have the major parties like NLD, USDP, I almost said UNDP, USDP, who, you know, they're national parties. They don't really talk necessarily about any specific ethnic group. And then you have the ethnic minority parties that are really talking about, okay, like, we are promoting equality, education rights, like these sort of things for our people. But what we're seeing with the SNLD, and they've sort of had a bit of a break from the NLD, the Shan NLD, is that they put out a 120-page manifesto, and they have policies and goals and timelines for everything from education and infrastructure in Shan State to fishing policies. And Shan is a landlocked state, so you're starting to see the beginning of a nationalism or an understanding of nationhood that's based upon civic engagement, of being in the place of belonging to the nation that isn't about race and ethnicity. And to see not necessarily the biggest party, but, you know, a major party in a state take on that platform, I think is something that's quite exciting and something that we can help to promote. Because I think in addition to what Thet Swe Win was saying about people not learning about other ethnic groups, of having just this very like Burma Buddhist dominance in education, most Myanmar people are also taught that race is the main lens through which you should see people. So, you know, I'm from diaspora, I grew up in the US, and so oftentimes the first thing people ask me here is, what race are you? Right? They're trying to figure out, why aren't you normal? And even with my parents in the US, you know, I would make friends with people who are Burmese, because there's only like 5 Burmese people in the area or something, and they're all like miles away. And so, you know, I would have like friends from other groups, and they would say, oh, like, how's your Mexican friend? Like, you know, did you eat lunch with your Japanese friend today? And I'm like, they have names here. Like, I would say, you know, my friend Amy is doing well. I don't know who this Mexican girl you're talking about is. But for them, it was really, it's how they see the world, right? Like, for them, religion and race are very, very tied up, but race will tell you if this is a person who will succeed in life, if they have good moral values, if they have good judgment, if they're, you know, good at certain things or bad at certain things, and if this is a person that brings value to your life. And it's not necessarily that they look down on every single race that isn't Burma. Like, we're Chinese, so it's complicated. But it's just that to them, race is just this very core defining feature of a person, and that is true in everyday life, and it's true in how we define who belongs to a nation and who would want what's best for the nation and the people who live in that nation. And I think the sooner we can start moving away from the idea of race, not just learning about diversity and all of these other things, which is good and necessary, but just really learning that we're all humans first, and all of these other things are happenstance, and they're cool and they're interesting and they're valuable to celebrate and promote. But, you know, our rights and our humanity comes first.
I think that really resonates with me as well, having grown up in the diaspora, mostly in the United States. And I think that, you know, for me, like until during the military era, there was this common kind of enemy that most people, whether they were willing to say so publicly or not, kind of knew they were running the country into the ground. And so there was this forced unity. I think only after the transition to shared power and semi-democracy has these questions of this overly nationalistic, exclusive race and religion-based national identity really come to fruition. And to be fair, I think that it's not, it's part of a trend that's happening globally, including in the United States and other places. So, you know, it's not unique to Myanmar, but I think that there are things about the Burmese national identity that already was very exclusive in that way. I'm going to let Brother Raiss put in his 2 cents, and then I had some questions prepared to, you know, stoke dialogue, but I see from Asia Center that some questions are already coming in from the audience. And so after Brother Raiss speaks, I will go to those questions as well.
Thank you, Brother Cote and Sister Min Thant. They just hit the nail. I don't have really a lot to echo. What Brother Cote was saying reminded me of, I'm going to take a little religious tangent, if you will excuse me over here. Reminded me of a verse from the Quran, as a matter of fact. And it says, if I may share it with you, please. It says, "O you mankind, we created you as man and woman, and we created you in different tribes and different cultures, so that you may know each other, so that you may learn about each other." So it says it's like the objective of being created as man and woman, and the objective of being created in different cultures and different tribes is so that, you know, you get to know each other. You get to, you know, you make this interesting. You find out about the other. So just like Brother Cote was saying, it's because we don't know each other. We don't know who's our next door, you know, current brother, who's our next door Kashan brother, you know, who is our Bamar sister, you know. So it's only when you start getting to know, that's when you start beginning to appreciate. And just, you know, coming back to Sister Min Thant saying, look, you can go all on your Facebook and this, and, you know, blame these guys and those guys and blame the corporations. And just the other day, somebody was asking me about, hey, do you think it's the British colonial divide and conquer, which is, you know, seeing its effects? I'm like, yeah, all that is all good and dandy. It's all good. It's history. But the fact of the matter is, we are, you know, we have to take responsibilities for ourselves. We are living our lives the way we choose to live our lives. If I choose to forget, to always demonize the Bamar and the Buddhists as a bunch of killers out there who's going to come and burn all my villages, then I will keep that mentality for generations, and I will propagate it until, God forbid, somewhere down in my second, third generation, there will be, you know, there will be this hate that will reciprocate back. Or I choose to do something that will dissipate that darkness, and you know, really go out there and learn about the other, which is the objective of being created. You know, just like how the Quran was saying, you were created different so that you can know the other. So I'll stop there, and sorry for my religious diversion into this.
No, I think that's great, and that's a beautiful quote that really sums things up well. We have quite a few questions coming in, which is great, and I think I'm glad that for this first question that really kind of went to the core of what we were all talking about, I'm glad we all had a chance to kind of speak more robustly. I'm going to ask the questions for those of you who are asking, who are sending in the questions in order, not so much as they came in, but how they fit into the discussion we're having. And to the panelists, because we have so many questions, if you could limit yourself to like a minute or so, and then I will call on people just because we can't make eye contact. But you know, if you don't have anything to say or want to pass, you know, feel free to do so, just because I want to make sure we get to all these questions. So the first question is, and that I think relates to the conversation we're just having, is how uniquely chauvinist are Burma in Myanmar compared to other Southeast Asian countries, and, you know, say the Javanese in Indonesia, or self-identifying Thai in Thailand, or the Malays in Malaysia. Like, how unique do we, you know, would we say that Burmese nationalism specifically is more exclusive? And we'll start with Thet. 1 minute.
Can you explain it again? I don't really get all of it.
Sure. I think the question goes to how much more uniquely kind of nationalistic and exclusive is the Burmese national identity compared to other Southeast Asian national identities, like the Thai identity, the Malay identity, because Southeast Asia is very diverse, and those countries are as well. How much like, do we think it's worse, you know, in our country and our national identity?
The thing is, like, as far as like my understanding, that, you know, if we compare with the other countries, like, you know, they assimilated, you know, into one identity. But for Burma, like, for example, like Thai, you know, we can see that Thai, how those Thai people assimilate, that, you know, for the Thailanders, for like, they just assimilate them into one Thainess thing. But, you know, but they fail to assimilate those southern people in the Padani, that, you know, those Padani people, so they keep resisting it, and so they cannot accept the Thai identity. So that is like, and also for the Indonesian, I think, like, they have one, they are quite diverse actually, you know, regardless of, I mean, in terms of religion or the races, they are very diverse, and they have like hundreds of thousands of, what is it, islands there. They are very diverse, but, you know, they have one same identity of the being Indonesian. So that is like, you know, I forgot how they, you know, name it. They have one Indonesian name of, you know, being the Indonesian identity, Panjavila or something. I forget it. So like, but they were like successfully assimilate into the civic nationalism. That, you know, regardless of, you know, whatever, you know, nationality you are, but, you know, you are one nation. I think Singapore also the same, that, you know, that they can do it. But for Myanmar, we are very incomplete, that, you know, incomplete nation building process, that we only have the body of the nation, but, you know, we do not have the spirit of the real, you know, identity of the whole nation. But the Burma identity, which is like, you know, being promoted by the many regimes since, you know, 1950s, they keep promoting about the Burma identity. And then the Burmese people. So right now, the migratory situation is that we are having a very like, you know, risky situation of the conflict, the identity conflict, because the Burmese identity were being oppressed. Burmese identity is the oppressor, that they are oppressive to the other minority groups. But now the other identities, like, you know, Rakhine or Kachin or Shan, they don't accept it at all. So they are raising their own identity against the Burmese identity. So now we are at the identity conflict. But the Burmese Buddhist identity, the Burmese Buddhist chauvinism, is very much strong, because they are being backed by the state, and they are being backed by the whole society of, you know, because we are brainwashed and we are poisonated. So this is how we are having the situation right now.
Min Thant, any brief thoughts to add?
Yeah, I think I can't speak as much to the situation in other Southeast Asian countries, because I don't know that much about them. But I think in Myanmar, what you can see is, if you're considered an indigenous ethnic group, the sort of chauvinism comes off in the sense of like, we conquered you, so you kind of need to do what we say. And then if you're seen as this outsider, Chinese, Muslim, South Asian, you know, these other sort of categories that aren't seen as indigenous, then it's your guest, so you need to do what we say. And that's kind of the narrative of the chauvinism. But I will say, I think, if you look at the diaspora, for example, if you look at the American Filipinx community, there is really a deep sense of being Filipino or Filipina and of being in that diaspora. Whereas if you look at the Burmese diaspora in the US, there is like the Southern California Chinese Burmese Association. There is, you know, Chin and Kachin churches. There, like, these identities and these ethnic groups and these different people practicing different religions, they're still segregating in the US. And I worked as a translator while I was in grad school when I was in the US. And when I got to the family and they had a severely disabled child, like she could not eat by herself, they were applying for government aid. And the first thing the family asked me was if I was Burma, because they didn't want a Kachin person translating for them, because the majority of the Burmese refugees in the area were Kachin. And, you know, even in the face of their child, of needing to get help for their child, of someone showing up to help them with their child for free, that was still something that they immediately felt was necessary to know.
Thank you. I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, even in my work with Burmese refugees or refugees from the diaspora of Myanmar in this country, even, you know, in some places in upstate New York where the community is vastly Karen, there might be just on religion alone, there might be a divide between the Karen Buddhists and the Karen Christians. So I do think that there is something about this religious and ethnic divisions that runs deep. Brother Raiss, any brief thoughts on this before the next question?
I'm good, thank you. Very incredible points,
Okay.
Brother Pote.
Great. So the next question is, how has COVID-19 affected nationalism in Myanmar? I mean, this is something that you know, I touched upon a little bit, and we've touched upon. I gave a presentation about this with Asia Center earlier in June. But let's see. Thet, you want to start briefly on this?
Wow. So how have the COVID-19 affected the nationalism? I've never thought of it like, but what we can see is that the current government, I mean, you know, the COVID-19 actually giving chance to the current government upper hand. That, you know, they are like, you know, they got, because the government and also the election is coming closer, so like they can, you know, control, you know, all the situation by, you know, by ordering everything, right? So they are taking it. So what we can see is that, you know, in the ethnic area, so many of the ethnic political parties are being restricted by the COVID-19 order. So like they cannot, you know, gather many people, or like, you know, so in one, like last month in Chin State, so like why some of the Chin youth wing member, Chin political party youth wing member, so they are gathering at a house for the election campaign, and they were being, the authority came and arrest them because they are gathering, you know, more than 5 people. So this kind of thing, you know, like, so the government used COVID-19 to, like, you know, how can I say, as a winning card, you know, for the elections. So when they see that, you know, they are threat for the, you know, elections, they just use it. So I'm not sure if we can see it as a, you know, that the government is enforcing nationalism, they're using COVID-19 to enforce the nationalism. But this, in a way, you know, is happening. That, you know, we can also say that, you know, when those ethnic people are seeing this kind of, you know, restrictions by the government, they just feeling that, you know, the Burma government is like, you know, doing all this, you know, thing to act.
So I think being conscious of the time and some other big questions, I'm going to pause for a second in case my Min Thant or Brother Raiss have any further thoughts on this. And if not, I'm going to move on to the next question. So just unmute yourself if you have any burning thoughts. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Yeah, I have
so I'll move. Oh, go ahead, go.
But I'll keep it very brief. But I have many thoughts. But yeah, I think it's a really great question. And I think what we're seeing in Myanmar around COVID-19 is a really interesting case study of how the Myanmar government, but also sort of the majority in Myanmar in general, have the sense of nationalism that is about pride and victimization at the same time. So you see a lot of pride at the beginning of the crisis, where government spokespeople were coming out and saying, you know, Myanmar doesn't have any cases because we don't shake hands, we don't use credit card, we just have like a cleaner culture, which, you know, if you've been here, like America is messing up terribly, but you know, you can't say we have better sanitation here than in the US. It's laughable on its face. But you know, there is this sort of like pride that welled up of, oh, Myanmar didn't have a first wave, or our first wave only had, you know, 300 cases and 6 deaths, whereas all these other bigger nations with lots of money, you know, failed. And there was this narrative that, oh, it's because of something unique in Myanmar culture. And then simultaneously, you know, or now that we're having the second wave and there are all these lots of people dying and lots of new cases and all these things. Very recently, there were rumors that, and this is not true, that the Thai government had ordered any Burmese person illegally crossing into Thailand to be killed, to be shot by the border guard. And people here, their response to that was to say, we should execute the same order. Of Thai people sneaking into Myanmar should also be killed on sight. Which, one, how many Thai people are actually sneaking into Myanmar? But also, I think it speaks to this idea of, you know, like of Myanmar, because it's sort of, it sees itself as a small country going against the world that needs to be the victim. And you see very similar things happening with the Rohingya crisis as well, right? Like there's the pride of like, oh, we support Mother Sue, we support Aung San Suu Kyi, you know, Myanmar's great, like we have better culture than the Rohingya, than Muslims, like we're trying to preserve our whatever. At the same time also saying, you know, all these like global organizations, the global Muslim, whatever, these like Western countries are trying to punish Myanmar, they're trying to keep us down, like we're just starting to have democracy. Yeah, so I think COVID-19 is a really good case study of this as well, and it reflects on what's happening with the Rohingya crisis as well.
Thank you. No, those are all really incisive and interesting thoughts. I'm actually going to shift to the next question and direct it to Brother Raiss, because it relates to a lot of the work that you do, and then give the other two panelists a chance to respond. So the question is, how can the international community partner with local and diaspora communities to reduce complicity in Myanmar, either with military investment or you know, changing maps to erase the Rohingya village names, or you know, other activities? So Brother Raiss.
Very, very good question. My counter question would be, how would you not you know, work with us when you see the, you know, when you see what's out there? It's money being used, public money being used, and also private money being used to profit from the heinous crimes that mankind can do. So you start with, I always scale it back to the individual, to ourselves. You start being a conscious consumer. You start finding out where your own consumption products are coming from, where your country is doing its trade with. So I would request all participants over here to find out which companies in your respective countries are investing or are working with corporations in Myanmar that have direct ties to the military, or that are part of Myanmar Economic Holdings Limited, or are part of any of the crown corporations, you see? So you raise awareness. So the mandate of Rohingya Human Rights Network that I chair, the primary mandate is to raise awareness and educate people of the grave human rights violations that are happening in Myanmar, not exclusively to the Rohingya people, by the way. So you start with this raising of awareness amongst the public, in academic circles, of course, amongst policymakers, and then you extend it to the, you know, to the larger policymakers. Take it to your prime minister's office, take it to your foreign affairs office, and make sure that that those companies, those organizations are tagged. They're red flagged. So you start with that, and then come back to bridging the gaps. You take initiatives within your communities at first, within your family at first, to make that effort to reach out to the other community, to reach out to the other ethnic minority, and then you work slowly upwards from there in with other community organizations, and then it will expand to the national and international scope. This is my take on it, and this is how we're doing it at the Rohingya Human Rights Network.
Thank you, Brother Raiss. So I'll just open it up to my Min Thant and Thet to add any thoughts, as well as to, if any of you have thoughts on the second part of this question, is when do INGOs actually make the situation worse, and how can they actually make the situation worse? That was kind of like a corollary second part of that question.
What was the first question? Sorry, like I can't remember.
The first question. The first question is, how can international, people, the international community, support activists in Myanmar to hold the military accountable and to basically, to advance these issues that we're talking about? And the second part is, how and when can international NGOs and international actors actually make things worse, despite possible good intentions or not?
Yeah, that's really good question. But we've been hearing this kind of question a lot, in many of the international seminars or talk. So then, but the thing is, like, we have to be very much very clever when we want to make the government to be accountable, because the thing, like, I like the way what international is doing at like ICG or like ICC or whatever issue, like in the Argentina issue, that they are trying to make the government accountable, and also for the the sanctions. But what happened is that it's like, in the country, all those perpetrators became heroes. They became the guardian of the country. But they are the protectors of the country. They are protecting from the international pressures. And then they felt like, okay, CIA want to, manipulate our politics here. Don't, listen to them. And also, like, for the ICJ issue, that is good that, we can repeat it, that how the government and Aung San Suu Kyi, especially like her government, that, they did not stand for the, truth, and then they did not stand for the all of those, the Rohingya and also the other, ethnic groups that, being killed by the Burmese military. So they became, together, to prevent in the, to defend in the ICJ. So it's really such a shame for the international community that, that the person like her is, protecting the military. But in the country, we have to know the country aspect as well. That inside the country, the thing that our mother Sue is, protecting the country. Whatever the military does, the bad thing, they felt like, okay, the military is bad. We all know, but we will only solve the problem among ourselves. We don't have to go to the international community. So right now, all the activists and the international community are trying to sue us in the international court. So we cannot let it happen. So we have to be supporting our mothers. Who we all have to be together. You can see that maybe you all have been seeing that the billboards that being posted in every city, the big billboards that we stand with Mother Sue. This kind of thing. Like when we give the international pressure to the government, but they got the inward, and then they got the internet support by the people, all the lay people, because they just don't know anything. They only know black and white. They only because many of the majority people, they are expecting NLD to be rule the country for like over 30 years, that they have been expecting for this. So when the NLD and FFG are in that position, to think that, okay, our struggle is already over, so she will take the lead and we just have to follow, and all we have to do is like, we have to support the lady. So that is, what is happening in the country. So we have to understand the internet aspects, and then how we can, well, the most important thing right now is that we have to convince the majority internet people to understand, the global situation, why, they are being brought to ICJ, and then what they did to the Rohingya and what they did to Shan and Kachin. Those are the things, like, we have to educate them, we have to enlighten them, to those majority public. Then only we will get the people's support, and then, the government will take the accountability. Otherwise, they will just lie. They always do that, When they write to the Bangladesh embassy, they said, the Muslim from Rakhine. But when they write it in Burmese, they said, illegal Bengali people. So this is how the government lied to the people to get support. This is, how they're doing it. So for the international NGOs, what they have to do, so like, we have quite a lot of challenges to work with the international NGOs, because like activists like us, we, even though we have plans, but sometimes we have to, adapt all the situations, and then we have to change all the plans, right? Then some of our activities need to do it, need to respond it timely. But, we have to report to our donors, and then we have to wait for their approval and everything. They are not that flexible. Like, so right now I have like 4 international donors that we are partnering with. Only 2 of them are very flexible, that, they allow us to whatever, situation that we are adapting. And we just need to write a justification to them that, how we want to change it. But the bigger donors, so like, they are very strict, and then like, if we want to change something, like, we cannot change it at all. And then like, sometimes we have to wait like at least like kind of 1 month, to get all of their responses. So like, very much red takes, to go, to carry out the activities. So, but that is good, because for the normal organizations, not for the activist organization. I mean, like the normal NGOs or local NGOs, whatever. So that is good for them, that they do not have that much, challenging or like timely responding activities. But for the activists like us, we have quite, difficulties and like challenges when we deal with the international NGOs and then donors, that we don't have much, the donor attentions, for some of our works as well.
Thank you. So we have 5 minutes left, and I want to be conscious of time, but there's one more question which was directly directed at you, Kothat, though I think this is something that we all might have thoughts on, just briefly, is, regarding the internal conflict within Myanmar, what role does interfaith dialogue play in diffusing tensions? So I think this is, relates to a lot of the work you've done directly, and what all of you have been speaking about. So just brief thoughts on the role of interfaith dialogue.
Okay, actually, like, so many of the people think me as an interfaith activist, but I'm not an interfaith activist at all. But, I work with the faith leaders because, like, I believe that their role in the community is tremendously, influential to their followers. But the interfaith dialogue, like, so what is happening in the country is that it's only at the top level, like the high level faith leaders, and then like it's only being held at the hotels, and very good places, and sometimes only they keep meeting the same people, so they don't expand their network to the broader people. And then actually the kind of interfaith dialogue should go down to the communities, and that the people should do that in their communities, and they have to discuss it. But I have been hearing all the interfaith activities like almost now 8 or 9 years, almost 10 years now, that there were a lot of interfaith activities, but we keep having all those interfaith, all those like faith-based conflicts in the country. Why? The interfaith activities that we have to change. I do support the interfaith dialogue, but not the way that they are doing right now. They have to change the way. They have to go down to the community, that they have to meet with the people. So that is the most important. Interfaith dialogue is good, but the way that they are doing is not that good yet.
Right, it's happening at a very elite level. Last thoughts, Brother Raiss and Min Thant?
Yeah, I would really agree with the fact that a lot of the interfaith dialogue is at the level of the leaders. I think, there has been good things that have come out of this. For example, a lot of these faith leaders, in many cases, can intervene if there are things happening at the community level, right? Like if they're friends, like if an imam is friends with a monk, and it's like a shopkeeper and a customer of different faiths had a problem, they can intervene and step in and be mediators. And those sorts of situations, we've seen those case studies, and that's great. But for the amount of money we've poured into these sorts of programs, well, not we, but that donor organizations have poured into these programs, these case studies they're few and far between, and they're not having impact on a systemic level. But yeah, I think a lot of it's education, right? Like, I remember the first time I came here, at the time I was on holiday from school, and my roommate is Muslim, or was Muslim, or she's still Muslim, but my roommate at the time is Muslim. And we have a lot of pictures on Facebook together. We're always hanging out. I would call her from here as much as the internet at the time could handle. And I heard the wildest things from my family members and the people who were around me who would see pictures of her. And, they would say, like, how has she tried to convert you? Like, is she trying to get you to marry, like, her husband and be, like, a sister wife with her? Like, I've heard, like, in mosque, they're not allowed to look at the ceiling, and that, like, just the strangest things that made absolutely no sense to me. But then, I would talk to them and be like, okay, like, who have you talked to that's told you this? Like, how many Muslims do you know? How many, like, Muslims have you talked to? And they're like, oh, I've never met a Muslim. And, a lot of it is just a lack of contact between people of different faiths, and just this very high, like, undisputable amount of information that's coming at them from everywhere that all reinforces itself, right? Because your monk tells you the same thing that your school books are telling you, that your government is telling you, that your parents are telling you, because
Am I frozen?
Yeah.
Am I frozen?
No,
Okay.
no, you're
Can you
not.
hear me
But
now?
she's frozen now.
Oh, she's frozen. Okay. Okay. With that, I think we are at time. I unfortunately have a meeting at work at 9, but I think this was a wonderful discussion. Brother Raiss, I'm sorry. I know you probably would have had something to add to that, but I think we need to try to wrap up. Thank you. It was beautiful to have this discussion with all of you. So it was great, and hopefully we can continue the dialogue at other convenings in person after this conflict after this crisis and pandemic is over. So with that, Asia Center, do you have any last words, or should we wrap up ourselves?
Take the photo.
Wrap up. Yeah, I think we can wrap up. I have to check my phone, I heard here. But thank you so much for this insightful and inspiring panel.